welcome.
Hi,
I'm Alex.
I'm Carly.
Carly, nice to meet you. So, you took the Strong Interest Inventory profile.
hmm
I'm wondering, what was your experience like taking that test?
Well, it was actually a pretty lengthy test.
hmm
I did get pretty bored during it a little bit, but like you know how it has a little scale that shows you how far you are.
hmm
I kept checking that, but I did find it interesting, and I really had to like critically think about what I really was interested in and how I felt about things.
Okay. Tell me more about what you mean by critically interested in. How did you go about like coming up with what you were interested in?
Um, well, just the directions itself was said you don't have to be skilled in this. It's just something that sounds really interesting to you
Right.
and that you like.
hmm
So I went by that. Um, but then I would sit there and like I would overthink it instead of like just going with my first thought.
Right.
Um, so I thought that was kind of difficult because then I just tend to overthink things.
hmm
But I thought it was great that I didn't have to just like stick to my skill set. That I could, the possibilities were endless with it.
hmm
So I thought that was really neat.
Right. So it sounds like you were able to imagine yourself doing some things and like decide whether or not that would be a good fit for you,
hmm
and that was kind of cool for you.
Oh yeah. To imagine what if I could do this? What if I actually had the skills to do that? That'd be really neat. So that was cool.
And you mentioned some of the questions were difficult for you to answer. Like you had trouble deciding whether or not you would be interested in that. I'm wondering if you've had like, were there any other difficulties that you experienced in the test?
Well, like for an example, like I love math,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of the math stuff after I would answer that, it didn't relate. Like there would be questions like close to science, and I'm not a big fan of science, even though it's like closely related.
Okay.
So that was kind of difficult, and I think I got a little bit lower score on that kind of thing. But it was interesting to see, what items they grouped together for
Okay.
occupations.
So some of the questions were kind of ambiguous and
Right, right.
I
And some of the
gotcha.
jobs I wasn't quite sure what their title was, so that kind of made it hard to decipher what they even did to even say, oh yeah, that'd be cool.
Okay, that's understandable. So let's look at your results. It looks like you got R, S, and I as your highest categories.
Mm-hmm.
So realistic is kind of like hands-on type stuff, like construction work, agriculture, athletics, things like that. Does that sound like an accurate?
Oh yeah, I was in sports all through high school.
Mhm.
I've worked a lot of jobs where I was hands-on, whether it was caring for people or just taking care of plants.
Mhm.
So that definitely is me to a T.
Okay.
I kind of like the laborious stuff. Sitting at a desk all day just drives me nuts.
Yeah, that's good. So it sounds like this test was a fair measure
Mm-hmm.
of your interest so far. And then I noticed your next letter, your next highest letter is an S, which is like things like healthcare services, helping people,
Mm-hmm.
things like that, like working in groups. Tell me more about that. Does that sound like you?
Yeah, so I've always been the type of person to put others 1st.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I like being able to focus on others and help them. Um, like I've worked in the hospital in the past, um, but I was kind of iffy about it because there are times where I'm very socially awkward. So like if it's a job, I think I do better. But like I've worked sales and I'm terrible at sales, so it's kind of interesting to if I could explore that a little bit more and like define
Okay.
where socially I'm best at.
Mm. So it sounds like some positions that fall under the S were a better fit than others.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes sense. But it's still an accurate measure, you would say.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. And then your next one was investigative, which is the like the math and the science, which you mentioned was something that you like a lot. And then it looks like your lowest ones were conventional, artistic, and enterprising, which your lowest was enterprising, and you mentioned that sales wasn't a good fit for you. So it sounds like you kind of agree with the results of the test.
Right. The only thing is artistic. Like I always thought
Yeah.
I was very creative.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of threw me off a little bit. But like I've always been very strong in liked math as a subject. So I could see how they're, you know,
Yeah.
they would be contenders, but it's kind of weird that it's that low on the list for me.
Okay. Right. I think it's important to keep in mind that it's not set in stone, your results, right?
Okay.
It's completely accurate. So, after we've discussed the results, tell me more about how you feel about them.
I don't know. I feel like they accurately describe me. And, I think it's interesting to look at the jobs that it offers
Mm-hmm.
from those results. Um, and I could see myself doing quite a bit of them. Like,
Okay.
I've always wanted to farm for my grandpa,
Mm-hmm.
and just because I'm a girl, it's never going to happen.
Okay.
So that's always been there, and to see that being towards the top of the list was pretty neat to see.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of want to take it to him and be like, see,
Yeah.
I am made for this.
That's cool, yeah. Okay, so let's go into some of these occupations that came up on the test. I see right here's your top 10 strongest occupations, and you see the first one is military enlisted. Have you ever thought about something like that?
I actually have, but when I discussed it with my family, they're like, yeah, I don't think you'd be best for it. I am a little hard on myself mentally, and then to have someone scream at me.
Okay.
Like, I could take it with coaches.
Mhm.
I did really well with that. Like, that's the best way I could work out is someone screaming at me.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I've always wanted to try it, but never had the opportunity.
Okay. So it sounds like the military might be a little too intense for your personality.
Yeah, it might be a little too intense. But yeah, I mean, I would be willing to try it.
Mm-hmm.
Just got a lot of other things going on.
Right, that's understandable. Okay, let's look at some of the other ones. You mentioned agriculture, which is on here. Tell me more about what you like about agriculture.
So I actually shown hogs for 8 years.
Okay.
Second generation with hogs. So that I thoroughly enjoyed that. I love spending time with the animals. We've had cows, chickens, all kinds of stuff on the farm. And like our farm does run through the family.
Okay.
And since my uncle died, like I've always wanted my uncle to teach me how to farm because my grandpa's a little stubborn. And then he died, and he was trying to teach his sons first, which is understandable.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until after he died that grandpa was like, hey, you want to come farm? And by that time I was in college. So yeah, that's been a struggle, but I do volunteer to help out anytime I can.
Okay. So you have kind of a family history of that line of work.
Right.
So it sounds like that might be something you'd be interested in getting into.
Yeah, in the future I hope to have a farm. I think it'd be really neat.
And then I see here some of the results are, one is automobile mechanic. Have you ever thought about becoming an automobile mechanic?
I've always wanted to be very self-sufficient with my vehicles, and but the only thing I know how to do is change my oil.
Okay.
And I just learned how to change a tire
Mhm.
because it blew at 4 a.m.
Right.
on the way home from work, so that kind of sucked. Learned the hard way, but yeah, I've always wanted to be more knowledgeable in automobiles, but it just never clicked for me.
Okay.
So I don't know if I need to sit and study some more. Like, it hasn't been a full focus for me, so I think that's why. But I think it'd be really interesting to
Okay.
look at, though, and
That's
try.
understandable. So that's a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So it seems like the one that you're most interested in on this list is the agricultural component. So like the farming and the taking care of animals,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. So tell me, do you know about any occupations related to that you could potentially get into?
I mean, there's a lot of farms from where I'm from, so where they breed like hogs or they collect eggs. I worked on a turkey farm, so I could easily get into that. Considering I'm right now in college for counseling,
Right.
I mean that's kind of a whole different field though.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's interesting that hasn't came up on the list at all.
Gotcha. So
Sorry, I don't know if that answered your question.
you're surprised that the counseling didn't come up
Right.
on the list. Okay. So you mentioned that you're in school for counseling now.
Mhm.
I'm wondering, how's that experience been for you?
I think it's been really good.
Mhm.
I was always worried if I whatever career I chose, if I would be wasting my time, ended up not liking it and then wasted money and time in college. But so far, I really like it. And some words of wisdom that my aunt gave me, who's in the same field, she said, "You can't teach compassion, and you easily have compassion and caring for people. And you can always learn the techniques and skills, but compassion has to be there before you can even do anything." So it's kind of what made me like, all right, this is something I can do. And then, like I said, in the future, I hope to have animals and a farm.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay. So it sounds like both are some top interests that you
Right.
have, and it sounds like you've had a positive experience in school for counseling.
mhm.
Okay. So out of all these, I'm wondering which one would you pick? So the agriculture is something that you'd want to get into.
Honestly, I really like the accountant also.
The accountant?
Yeah, because I
Okay.
really like the math and I like money.
Gotcha. Tell me more about what you like about that. Or what
So
would be appealing?
my dad actually taught me budgeting,
Mhm.
and I've done really well so far. Gotten through college debt free by working really hard, hands-on stuff,
Mhm.
and just saving my money and knowing how to spend it wisely. So I think it'd be really cool to work in that kind of field. That actually would have been my backup if I didn't go with counseling.
Okay.
So I guess there's a lot of areas I want to try to keep in my life,
Mhm.
and I guess if I don't pursue being an accountant, I can at least like budget my own stuff. So I kind of get be my own little accountant.
Okay. So it sounds like you have like a top three occupation. So we
Mhm.
have counseling, agriculture, and an accountant.
Right.
So what I'd like to do is set up another appointment for us to talk more about how
Okay.
to get into those or like some next steps into exploring those careers.
Alrighty.
And then I want to leave you with some resources today. So if you want on your own time, you could look into the jobs that show up on this inventory.
Okay.
So some resources that will be helpful in exploring these careers would be onetonline.org,
All right.
ohiomeansjobs.com,
Okay.
and then bls.gov, which will give you some statistics on like salaries and job growth and outlook and things like that.
Okay. Sweet.
Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Well, it was nice meeting you today,
It was nice
Farley.
meeting you too. Thanks.